Hey, creative souls, writers, word witches, love to write, love astrology? Good, because in this video, I'll be talking about the new moon in Cancer and how you can use its energy to benefit your writing practice. I'm consulting one of my favorite astrologers on YouTube, Kelly at Kelly's Astrology, for help with interpreting these energies. And as always, I will put links to Kelly's channel and her new moon in Cancer video in the description. We'll also have Cancer in Jupiter, giving us a little extra something to work with. So I'll get into all that in just a minute. If we haven't met yet, either in real life or virtually, I'm Johnny, and you can learn more about me at my website, johnnymazzacco.com, and my blog, writingthroughthebody.com. If you follow me for a while, as you can see, I'm in a different space. This is my daughter and her husband's lovely backyard, and I'm dog sitting for them for a couple of weeks. So I'm back and forth between their place and my place, taking care of these two lovely animals, my kitty Iris and Norman, my daughter's dog. So you might see him in the background. He's right down here next to me right now. So on Wednesday, June 25th, which is today, the day I'm recording this, the moon will be new at 4 degrees in Cancer. And this comes just a few days after summer solstice and after Jupiter has moved into Cancer. And Kelly says this is going to give us themes of resetting and refocusing, and it's all based on this Cancerian, Jupiterian energy. And so it's like expanding intentions or resetting something in a bigger way. And one of the themes of this new moon, because it's in Cancer, is a focus on self and others. So it's very nurturing, right? Because Cancer is the nurturing sign of the zodiac. And as Kelly says, this could also be about the natural environment or care of the earth itself. So nurturing and caretaking are important themes, as you might guess. I love this for us writers, because what do I always say? Honoring your impulse to write is an act of self-love. And with Jupiter just beginning a 12-month transit through Cancer, Kelly says this, with the new moon, marks a really unique mix of short-term beginnings and bigger, more long-term beginnings. And these beginnings could be about you attuning to awareness of growth. So, how do you want to grow as a writer? Is the first question that comes to mind. Can you think of short-term and long-term beginnings that you want in your writing life? And if you've been following me for a while, or if you're on my email list, you know about my current Kickstarter campaign and the fact that it's wrapping up as of June 29th. So we have 4 days left. And this is right on the heels of this new moon and Jupiter moving into my sign. And for me, this has to do with nurturing my practice as a professional writer and author. And I truly do feel like I'm setting the stage for my future with this campaign, which started on Beltane very intentionally and is coming to a close, as I said, just days after the new moon and Jupiter moving into Cancer. So I would love to hear what you have in the works and how you're approaching your writing in terms of thinking of the future and what you would like to see for yourself long-term in your writing life. Do you want to be a published author, maybe? Do you want to see your short stories in literary journals and magazines? Do you have a novel you want to publish? Or do you see yourself taking matters into your own hands and publishing your work independently, the way I am? Because Jupiter will be in Cancer for an entire year, this makes space for us all to head into this wide open expansion, because Jupiter is about expansion. And being in Cancer, the expansion is about healing, because Cancer is about nurturing and caretaking. How might that apply to your writing practice and writing life? Can you think of aspects that you need to heal? It could be that maybe you want to commit to improving your craft and really expanding into the title of writer. And maybe you want to heal some belief or internal monologue you have that holds you back. And maybe you've let your practice slide, and it happens to the best of us. And you want to get back to devoting yourself to it with earnest. And maybe this is the first time ever that you'll do that. Kelly makes an interesting point about Cancer. Of course, I think most of us know that Cancer involves emotions and feelings. And Kelly points out that it also has to do with cravings. So it's what you need and what really needs your attention. And not just for the next 4 weeks, as we normally think of the influence of a new moon, but for 12 months, because Jupiter is in Cancer for that long. So we're going to have this really nice long stretch of Jupiter energy in this very nurturing sign of Cancer. And I'll talk more about what that means. She also says that because Cancer is the sign of the moon, and the moon is the ruler of this new moon in Cancer, we get this interesting repeating loop, which she calls super lunar themes. And she says this is about being aware that life is in this constant state of ebb and flow, and really embracing the reality that we can't be perpetually in motion. We can't be perpetually productive, right? We can't just crank out anything, including writing, the same way every day, every week, every year, day in and day out. And she says that's how the sun works, this blazing constant force that just keeps going. Lunar energy reminds us that we're aligned with periods of activity and periods of rest and retreat. So that ebb and flow we see in the sky with the moon, waxing and waning, becoming full and moving to new, and then expanding again. I like to think of it as this kind of expanding and contracting energy that we live within. And when we become in sync with it, I think it can really do amazing things for us in terms of how we manage our lives. And so with this in mind, what have you heard me say about maintaining a writing life? Do you remember that Do Nothing challenge that I did last year? Some of you took part in that. It was for this very reason. In a more recent video I posted about maintaining a writing practice as a neurodivergent. Did you see that one as well? And I think this ebb and flow mentality applies to us all, whether we're neurodivergent or not. And this is not to say that neurodivergent and neurotypical brains are alike. They absolutely are not. But we can all embrace this ebb and flow and really tune in and listen and allow ourselves to work hard and then rest up, right? Because we are humans in bodies with expiration dates. We don't have forever. As much as I wish that weren't true, so we need to take care of our bodies. They're the containers, right, for this generation of our creativity. And this is one of the features of my writing through the body method, that strong connection between our bodies, minds, and emotions. And of course, in that method, we apply these features to character development, but it also applies to us. And as a side note, I want to mention, I have developed a writing through the body method for writer's block. So the original writing through the body is solely for character development. It's for your craft. And this newer version of writing through the body is for you, the writer. So my plan is to bring that out of hiding this year and share it with you all. And that's right in line with this expansion that I mentioned earlier. And so for you, think about how you can take some of this moon wisdom forward with you in the weeks and months ahead. Do you want to modify your schedule to allow for this more fluctuating or ebb and flow quality of motivation and drive, and then rest and recharge? And if you don't already, I hope that you will really tune in and listen to what your body and brain and nervous system need, and then plan accordingly. Really let it be okay to have a period of time, maybe a week, of being highly productive in your writing. And then if you need it, because you've spent so much of your inner reserves, you'll take a week to reseat a bit and rest up. Here in the US, and I know in other cultures around the world, we valorize the grind, right? The self-made person who doesn't sleep. You know that old adage, I'll sleep when I die? Not getting enough sleep is very detrimental to your mechanism, to your body. So we can, reach burnout on a number of levels without adequate sleep and rest. I hope you will, in addition to building a walking practice into your writing practice, that you'll also build in a sleeping or a napping practice. And I know that might sound silly to some, but it really is a lovely way to let your body and therefore your subconscious know that it's safe and taken care of. And when we feel safe and taken care of, our nervous systems just settle down and we're able to be more present, our brain fogs less, and we can be a lot more productive in the times when we need to be and want to be. And if you know about my writing through the body method, I mention in it that neuroscientist Candace Pert said, based on the science that she did that connected emotions to the chakras, she said your body is your subconscious mind. And so there is no separation. Your actual physical body and what it holds within it, it holds memory. I mean, science has proven this as well. Philip Levine, what's his first name? Levine. Waking the Tiger, I think was his book. And then Gabor Mate in his work around body memory. And science has shown that our bodies do hold memories and emotions. And in her work, Candace Pert was able to prove that the emotions are created in the very locations of the chakras, these energy centers in our bodies. And so she concluded that your body itself, your actual physical being, is your subconscious mind. It's not this thing that's out floating somewhere up here or wherever you imagine it to be. It's actually your physical body. And so for that reason, we need to take care of our bodies, right? And by doing this, by having a walking practice, by having a napping practice or a resting practice, your subconscious, which, as I said, is your body, will reward you with more ideas and not just new stories, but to work through creative problems that you might have with plot or character development or existing projects. Kelly says that another important need during this time under this particular new moon is food and nourishment because moon and Cancer is the nurturer of the zodiac, ruled by the moon. So it's about the literal substances that we take in to nourish us. And this can relate to us individually, what we eat, how mindful we are about how food impacts our health. And she says it can also be about the degree of access to food. And this can relate to agriculture and farming. And she says we might hear more during this time about food access and distribution and essential resources in global topics in the news. So how does this land for you as a writer? And sidebar, really, what does this have to do with writing? And I'll get there, I promise. But will you give more thought to connecting with the wisdom that helps with new rhythms around maybe food prep and nourishing yourself with whole foods and healthy foods? Will you explore how to support improved food access in your wider community, whether it's local, national, or global? All right. So how this relates to writing. If you take intentional care about what you put in the machine, and I say this with giant quotation marks because my whole point about this is that we are not machines, but what we put in our vessels impacts how we function and what we express. And as creatives, that's a very important thing. So too much sugar, lots of refined carbohydrates, artificial sweeteners, alcohol, high sodium foods, and more can cause brain fog. And when we have brain fog, it's difficult, if not impossible, to create. Kelly also points out that this new moon is in a cazimi with the sun. So a cazimi occurs when another planet is in very tight conjunction with the sun or right next to the sun. So close that in a way the sun makes the planet somewhat invisible for a while. And this means that Jupiter's energies can be thought of as somewhat hidden right now because it's being blocked by the sun in this cazimi. And that means that things related to Jupiter might be happening kind of behind the scenes, in secret or out of sight. And she says we can think of that as Jupiter undergoing kind of a rebirth of sorts, in some ways washing away the past 12-month cycle, right? So Jupiter in Cancer is in its exaltation, which means it's in its fullest strength, its most robust. And this is way better than Jupiter in Gemini, where it is in its detriment and where it has been for the past 12 months. So while life might feel a little rough around the edges right now, things are trying to settle into place and a lot of good stuff can come out of this. So if you're struggling with a draft and, are maybe having a hard time getting past a stuck point, trust that it's all going to be sorted out behind the scenes. So again, your lovely subconscious has all the answers and it will come. And Kelly thinks of it this way. Jupiter is getting its instructions from the sun about how to proceed over these next 12 months. And this made me think of what it's like to show up on the first day of a new job, getting the lay of the land, figuring out the culture and how it works and so on. And so Jupiter is gathering information right now so that we can individually undergo these major renovations. And she says to think of the seeds being planted this week as what will grow and come to fruition when Jupiter finally knows what it's going to do and can start moving forward toward this full-on expansiveness. So as an example of this, my Kickstarter campaign is wrapping up, I think I said this earlier, a few days after the new moon. So on the day I'm recording this, we are at 43% funded. And some people would lose heart, but I am not. I know it's going to fund fully. If you don't know how Kickstarter works, if you don't reach your goal, then you lose everything that has been pledged. And I just know that it's going to happen because when you know, you know. I have had the belief in this new moon energy and how it's going to take care of me. I will just say that certain things are falling into place behind the scenes. And there's that cazimi effect, right? There's some things that have been happening behind the scenes. I just know it's going to get funded. Then once it is funded, I can still accept pledges because I've added this pledge later feature to the campaign. And I did that because a wonderful nonprofit in Portland called Free Flying Oregon, has agreed to support my efforts to publish Miranda's Garden independently. Even after the campaign has ended, they will continue to take steps to plan events and promote my novel. And I just learned about this week, actually on Monday, when Jupiter went into Cancer. So do you see what I'm saying? Having them on board and having the Pledge Later feature on the campaign means that we will be able to reach some of the stretch goals listed on the campaign. And this all has to do with Jupiter and things just lining up in the cosmos and ending that freaking, what has it been, 12-year cycle, 13-year cycle that has been so difficult for so many of us. And, I can honestly say I'm feeling lucky right now. And that's what Jupiter is about. In addition to expansion, Jupiter is about luck and good fortune. And I'm really seeing that play out in my life. And it's not just luck. I mean, I've worked my ass off, without a doubt. 30 years to get the novel to a state where it could be published, and then working my ass off on this campaign, making connections with people, but it's all coming together. And so if you're interested, I will put links in the description to Free Flying Oregon's website. They are focused on the mental health and wellness of young adults or people who are young at heart. Much of their focus is how nature can be a healing force. And so once they heard about Miranda's Garden, they just felt like it was a natural match. And so I'm very fortunate that they have agreed to get on board. I will also put a link to the Kickstarter campaign if you don't know about it and want to check it out and see what Miranda's Garden is all about. Kelly talks about what Jupiter stands for. And it's already inspired to high ideals, justice, mercy, sustainability, sharing wealth and resources, protection, and safety for all. And she says that for this reason, there might be this overarching question of how do we get the plenty that exists to all who need it? So, in what ways can you relate that to writing? So it could be that maybe themes of sustenance or scarcity might show up in your work, or maybe you work for an organization that does work around these issues, and you will need to be creating documents or reports or content about it. And I really hope this isn't the case, but maybe some of you have your own personal concerns about these issues. And I've been there myself, and I know how hard it is to create when your primary survival needs are not being met or they feel threatened. And I just want to say, if you're in a situation like this, I hope that you have people you can get in touch with and ask for help, whether it's friends or family or local organizations that are meant to help people in that way. Please don't be too proud. I have had to depend on those organizations before, and it was a really hard thing for me because I was raised by a dad who said, we don't take handouts, no matter what. We didn't have a lot of money. But that message was embedded in me. And so when I had to go on when I was a single mom, it was a really hard decision for me. And there was some shame around it. And I hope if you're in need of something like that, that you will kind of embrace that you deserve the help. You deserve the assistance. You deserve to be able to take care of yourself. And we live in a world right now that is not set up for us to thrive. And so for those of us who want to create, and for all of us, honestly, I think it's really important that we let people help us. And I think I have this on my mind because, letting the nonprofit help me was a really big step for me. And so again, and not to keep talking about myself, but I'm just using it as an example how when things line up with the cosmos, you just know that something is meant to be. And I hope you have something in your life that you feel is meant to be, and that you are seeing the ways that it lines up with what's going on in the sky, and in particular around your writing life, and anything in your life that impacts your ability to write. Another thing Kelly mentions is this access to ancient wisdom and divine knowledge, with this interplay between the sun and the moon right now. Because the moon, get this, is also in a cazimi with the sun. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So as I mentioned earlier, due to the Jupiter cazimi, things are taking place in private, behind the scenes, and also with the moon in cazimi. So it's extra super secretive right now, and not in a bad way. I see it more as like our subconscious is working, and that's behind the scenes. That's in private. We don't know what's going on in there. And then there may also be some good things going on behind the scenes around projects we're working on that can really benefit from this energy right now. When we think in terms of ancient wisdom, it might mean, as Kelly says, spending times in sacred spaces, whatever that means to you. And she points out that this can be, something like sacred temples, or it can mean time in nature, right? Nature is a sacred space for many of us. It is for me. Also, nurturing spaces in the home, like the kitchen, that is also a sacred space because the kitchen is the place where food is prepared, oftentimes consumed. It's what nourishes us. It's kind of the hearth of the home. And so it makes me wonder, is anyone working on a cookbook right now? This would be a great time for that. And really, because there is this private element to it. Maybe, do you hear that crow? So many crows out. Anyway, sorry for that distraction. It's a lovely distraction, but so you might want to, if you do have an idea for a cookbook or any kind of book and you haven't shared it yet, it might be a good idea to keep it under wraps right now because sharing ideas with others can sometimes work against us. And this has been, and I'll say continues to be, a hard thing for me to manage because I get very excited about my ideas and so I share them. I like to talk about them, only to way too often see them show up in other people's work or social media posts. And so I'm really wanting you to heed this. So really protect your precious ideas now and always. And when you have them, write them down and claim them so that they don't drift off and land on someone else before you can shape them into something like a story or a new magazine you want to make. Capitalize on this Kazemi energy and do your work behind the scenes in private, all right? These energies are impacting us in areas that take place in our private lives, things you want to keep to yourself, even though it's a very potent energy. So do your best with that. Really think of it as honoring yourself and your soul and your mind and what your spirit wants to create in the world. And Jupiter is, as I said, newly in Cancer. And Kelly says this serves as a buffer, right? It gives a supportive quality to these other moon-focused themes that I mentioned earlier. And there's this vibe of a kind of care and protection that's sustainable. So it's not just for now. It's this legacy kind of protection. And I really love that. After these difficult decade plus a few years, I'm looking for some legacy protection and things going smoothly for a good long while. And of course, it's never all sunshine and roses, right? So what are some problematic elements that we need to know about and work with around this new moon in Cancer? Well, the troublemakers are Saturn and Neptune. Both are in Aries. Saturn is 2 degrees, Neptune is 1 degree. And Kelly cites ancient astrologers as saying that anything with a 3-degree marker as being particularly potent. And so because these are so close to that 3-degree mark, they're extra, extra potent. She also describes as having some Saturnian energy baked into this new moon. And this can show us how the new moon can maybe help us move forward with some recent challenges that we faced, moving out of a period of restriction, navigating some kind of loss maybe. And this can mean loss of any kind, loss of an idea that you had. Have you ever woken up first thing in the morning and had this brilliant idea or a dream, and then you don't write it down and then it just disappears? That can be loss. It can be, unfortunately, loss of a person, a pet, a friendship, a relationship of some kind. It can be loss of a job, which can call into question those themes of scarcity around food sources that I mentioned earlier, right? So all of this, though, can bring about, as Kelly says, clarity of existing limits. So she gives an example of maybe understanding, maybe for the first time, how firm a boundary is or how to navigate rules or regulations that we might disagree with or we find restrictive. For us writers, I think of this in terms of traditional publishing. It is such a stodgy old paradigm. It's very patriarchal. And this is not to say that, there isn't value in having our work published traditionally. There absolutely is, but there are so many other options available to us now. If you choose to go the traditional route, now is a good time to really explore and discover what the boundaries are in that world and whether or not you find them too restrictive. I did. At least for Miranda's Garden, I did. And, I feel differently, at least for now, about my nonfiction book on my writing through the body method. Kelly says that we're currently seeing a disintegration of sorts around Saturnian things. So this is authority figures, leaders, organizations with a lot of power or influence, and government is often associated with Saturn. So this disintegration of safety or security, we might see people in power feeling out of control over certain situations and maybe overexerting to compensate for all of that out of fear. And this leads to instability. Now, who comes to mind for you? Even if you don't follow politics closely, you know who I'm talking about, right? And this could also apply to the publishing world. So the big 5 publishers, as they're called, they slowly but surely have been gobbling up and acquiring other small publishers. And so who knows, maybe we'll see something there disintegrate. You might see something that you thought was a solid structure in your life disintegrate. Maybe the company that you work for, you're going to find out is struggling, filing for bankruptcy, going out of business. Maybe you write for a living and that's going to impact you. All of these things that we talk about in relation to life and the world can directly and indirectly impact your writing life. Okay, so what about now this Neptune and Aries energy? Well, Kelly says that this can cause things to be somewhat clouded or confusing, and it can create uncertainty. And Neptune can bring outpourings of emotion, especially for those experiencing kind of senseless suffering, whether it's our own or we see it in others, in the lives of others, and we're just very hurt by it, by seeing what's happening in the world. So don't be surprised if we see this groundswell, as Kelly says, of emotion for those who are suffering. So this Neptunian energy with all this emotion paired with this new moon in Cancer, that means lots and lots and lots of feelings, probably about lots of things. So during this time, we need to really sort out fact from fiction. And again, really hard to do these days. We have this person in the White House who really functions on smoke and mirrors all the time. That is all he knows. I am convinced of this. And, plenty of people have bought into what he has said. And he talks about fake news, which is just the opposite. And granted, news can be biased. I accept that. But he refers to the media as fake news to cast doubt in the minds of his followers. And he's been very successful in doing that. So we all really at this time need to do our own legwork, do our own research, figure out what is fact, what is truth, and what is not. And I understand truth is subjective. Fact is not subjective. Lies are not subjective. And I would say especially if you are writing for the media, if you are writing blog posts, content, or creating courses, whatever it is you do in the world that is based on the work of others, that references the work of others, I really recommend that you research it and you make sure that what you are saying is accurate and that you cite your sources if you use sources, because otherwise that's plagiarism. So Kelly says we also need to be aware of worrying about worst case scenarios, things that are not always grounded in facts and reality. So again, we can be presented with this ideas of, the world is falling apart, and sort of like, I'm going to tell you it's falling apart so you will be afraid and listen to me. And meanwhile, I'm going to do things that will make the world fall apart, right? So we really need to be aware of worst case scenarios. If they are presented to us, we need to figure out, are they real? And I think we also, as writers, can use our words at this time to have a lot of impact on the world, to set things straight. And so this book I'm editing right now is for a publisher. It's not one of the big five. It's for a smaller publisher that writes, I would say, conspiracy theory, whistleblower type books. So it's interesting that I am working on a project like that during this time. And maybe you are too. Maybe you are writing something yourself that is an expose. This is a really great time to be doing that behind the scenes, right? So all of this Neptunian energy is actually contradictory to the Saturnian energy that I just talked about. With all of this kind of contradictory energy and then things happening in private and Jupiter not yet coming into full force because it's in this Cazimi, you might feel overwhelmed. And I will say that I do. I'm absolutely overwhelmed right now. And so you're not alone. My overwhelmness has to do with my schedule right now. And some of the things I've taken on, knowing what they would be. Others I took on and then other things happened and I just have to move forward and do what I agreed to do. So if your life feels messy, either personally or with your schedule, is this something that is going to pass in the near future like it is for me? Or can you see a light at the end of the tunnel like I can? Or do you need to take some intentional actions to clean up the messiness? Because anytime our life is messy, it is very difficult to write and to produce pages. So remember earlier I said that this new moon with Jupiter's involvement is presenting us with both short-term and long-term beginnings. What do you want to adjust this week that will last as it pertains to your writing life? So if your life feels messy and you're not able to write, is that a temporary or a permanent thing right now, something you feel you can't change? Think about ways that you can do something different. And I really think this comes down to how badly do we want to write? And I'm not saying this as a passive way to shame anyone, like, well, if you wanted it bad enough, you'd make it happen. What I mean is that if we truly want to write and the current structure of our day-to-day life isn't supporting that, we can start by acknowledging how much we want to write. That's the first step. And then after we acknowledge it, we can privilege that thought in our minds and our hearts and remind ourselves every day how much having a writing life means to us. Once that thought becomes a belief that gets woven into the fabric of our consciousness, it cannot help but become a reality because we will be forced to take steps to allow it to happen. And like I said earlier, my schedule right now, it is absolutely crushing. It is crushing me. But I can see that light at the end of the tunnel. I hope you can too if you are feeling crushed. And when I feel crushed like this, then my chronic illness flares up, which it has. And so I'm not doing great, not by any stretch. But I know that I just need to focus and get through it. And once the campaign ends, I'm going to take a couple days to rest. Like I mentioned earlier, that ebb and flow. And I get my feet and figure out what's next. And so I really encourage you to do that as well. Could also mean you have something messy going on with a writing project you're working on. So how are some ways you can deal with messiness? Well, it kind of depends on what the messiness is about. If you feel like you have lost focus and you don't know what your story's about anymore, always go back to your character. What do they want? And then start to look for ways that you have moved away from that. And if you've moved away from it, ask yourself why. Maybe you didn't get the desire right the first time. Maybe you veered off because your subconscious knows something. So I always say to counteract messiness in a writing project, go back to the protagonist, their deep desire, and then next look at their deep wound. And how do those two work against each other? The deep wound and the deep desire. The desire comes from the wound. If you have a character who is abandoned as a child, they're going to want love and safety. How does that wound keep showing up in their life? And to keep them from getting that safety and love that they want. That's the framework for that whole story. So with this new moon and Jupiter Cazimi in Cancer, the Cancer part of your chart is being totally reset and reconstructed right now, Kelly says. And she says this takes us back to that last half of, and this is what I was mentioning earlier when I said the past decade plus so many years. She says this energy right now is taking us back to the last half of 2013 and the first half of 2014, right? So this means there's all this reassessing and upgrading to benefit your current existence. And I think that's pretty exciting. So do you remember what you were doing back then? And did life start to feel out of control? Mine sure did. That's when I lost my remote teaching and I made the choice to sell all my things and hit the road and house sit. And I did that for over a year. And life has not been right since. And it's been challenging and turbulent and trying. And I'm ready for something different. And so I'm wondering if this aligns with you. I'm wondering if something major happened in your life, the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, that left an enduring mark that you are ready to leave behind. And as I always say, if you don't already have your chart, you can get one for free online and see where you have Cancer. Then see for yourself which house your Cancer is in. And that will tell you a lot about how this new moon will impact you and in what part of your life. So as an example, I'm a Cancer sun. In fact, my birthday is tomorrow on the 26th, and Cancer is in my midheaven, right? So I've been told that Cancer in the midheaven means a career path focused on nurturing and empathy and emotional connection. However, Cancer in my midheaven sits right next to Mercury, which is about communication and words, so writing, right? So that all makes sense. I care for people around these themes. I care for people with words, and I care for them by serving as a writer and a writing mentor and teacher. So I would love to know in the comments where Cancer is in your chart and what part of your life that is going to impact. And then how that relates to your writing practice. So I'd love to know how you're making those connections. All right, so if all this isn't enough, as I said earlier, the moon is also a Cazimi right now. And that's where the secretive behind closed doors kind of energy comes from. And the moon is kind of like that anyway, right? Well, when it's in a Cazimi with the sun is completely, I guess you can say, outshining it, hiding it. So that means both Jupiter and the moon are getting the lay of the land that I mentioned earlier about how to behave moving forward. And they're checking in with the sun, which is giving them their marching orders. So we have to be a little patient. And the moon will become visible again within 24 hours from being invisible in this Cazimi because of the sun. With Jupiter, it's going to take a bit longer, 2 weeks. So mid-July. All right. So we're going to have to hold tight and just be patient and know that mid-July, we're going to see what this Jupiter vibe, this expansive, good fortune vibe is going to bring us. And this return to visibility is when we want to move forward in a more outward way to share what the seeds that we've planted this week with the new moon are going to do, right? So this is about the dreams or desires that you become clear about this week, anything that you've initiated this week, nurturing them in the dark, AKA your subconscious, right? Your body, taking care of your body, letting it rest, feeding it good things. And so Kelly uses this analogy for that. And I love it because it really aligns with Miranda's garden. The beginnings that are happening now are like the seed that's been planted in the soil before the sprout breaks through. So the seed is down there in the dark under the soil, but it's doing things. Things are happening. So, lovely writer, protect what you are working on right now. Start to imagine the beautiful and meaningful stories that are germinating in your subconscious. Trust that that's happening and get ready for luck and good fortune and deep wisdom to step out of hiding and change your writing life. As always, I send you mad writing mojo. Happy writing.